I never thought I would hear those words in my own home, words that ripped through me like knives. It was late evening. I had just finished clearing the dinner plates, and the house had fallen into that eerie silence that comes after a long day. My son, Daniel, and his wife Claire had excused themselves to the living room. I lingered in the hallway, just out of sight, folding a dish towel, when I heard it, his voice. "She's worth more dead than alive." For a moment, I froze. My mind refused to process the words. Surely I had misheard. But then Claire's voice followed, calm and sharp. Exactly. Her pension, her insurance, all of it would finally be ours. "You're wasting time, Daniel. Don't you see? We are struggling while she sits there, eating into resources that should belong to us." My breath caught in my throat. My heart pounded so loudly, I feared they might hear it from the other side of the wall. My hands trembled, and the dish towel slipped from my fingers, landing softly on the floor. They were talking about me. I felt a wave of betrayal, unlike anything I had ever known. Daniel was my only son. I had raised him after his father's death, working 2 jobs, sacrificing every dream I had so he could build his future. And now, this. I took a cautious step back, my knees weak. My mind swirled with anger, disbelief, and a stabbing sadness. I pressed my hand against the wall for balance, the cool paint grounding me as reality sank in. Inside the room, Daniel's voice grew more forceful. "Claire, it's not that simple. She's still my mother." Claire scoffed. "Mother? Daniel, she's a burden. You keep saying you'll handle it, but every month we're drowning in bills while she keeps her savings locked up. She's selfish. Don't you care about our future, about the children we want to have?" Selfish. I nearly gasped out loud. After everything I had done, every sleepless night, every dollar saved for his education, every meal skipped so he could eat, and now, in my old age, I was nothing but a burden? I staggered back into the hallway, my tears threatening to spill. I bit my lip, forcing myself not to make a sound. Betrayal was a bitter taste in my mouth, but alongside it burned a spark of anger. That's why I was packing now. I had saved every dime of my Social Security checks, slipping them into an old envelope in my drawer. I wasn't helpless. Not yet. I folded a faded photograph of my late husband Robert and tucked it into the suitcase. His eyes in the picture seemed to ask me, "Why are you letting them treat you this way?" I whispered back, "I won't anymore." As I zipped the bag, I felt a mixture of fear and determination. Could I really survive out there on my own? Did I even have a place to go? But then came the moment that shook me to my core. I had stepped into the hallway, dragging my suitcase behind me, when I heard voices coming from the lounge. It was Charles, my son. "She doesn't know the real reason we put her here," he whispered. Linda laughed softly, "And she never will. As long as the paperwork stays buried, she'll think it's just because she's old and difficult." My heart froze. Paperwork. Buried. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear more. Emily's voice chimed in then, hesitant, almost guilty. "Dad, maybe she deserves to know. I mean, it's her life." "Emily," Linda snapped, "not a word. Do you understand? If she finds out, everything falls apart." Everything. I stumbled back toward my room, my breath ragged, my chest tightening as though 1,000 stones pressed against it. So it wasn't just about me being difficult. There was something else, something they had hidden, some secret locked away behind legal papers and lies. I sat on the edge of my bed, suitcase open, tears streaming down my face. I remembered every sacrifice I had made for Charles. The nights I skipped dinner so he could have seconds. The time I pawned my wedding ring to help him pay his mortgage, the years of devotion, and now, this. "Margaret," Sharon said as she walked past my door, "are you okay?" I wiped my tears quickly. Yes, I'm fine, but I wasn't fine, not at all. Because in that single overheard conversation, my world shifted. It wasn't just betrayal, it was conspiracy. As I closed the suitcase again, I whispered to myself, "They think I don't know, but I will find out. And when I do, they'll regret ever putting me here." I didn't know what the paperwork was, or why they had buried it, but I knew one thing for certain. My family hadn't put me in this nursing home just because I was old. It was because of something much darker, and I was going to uncover it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the words came back to me, sharp and cruel, like glass shards pressing into my chest. She's worth more dead than alive. By dawn, I was sitting at the edge of my bed, staring at the faint light creeping through the curtains. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. I felt like a stranger in my own home. But the truth was, this wasn't the first time Daniel and Claire had shown me their coldness. It was just the first time I had heard it spoken so clearly, so heartlessly. When Daniel was little, we had nothing. His father, my late husband, died in a factory accident when Daniel was only 7. I had no time to grieve. I had a child to raise and bills to pay. I worked double shifts at the diner down the street, scrubbing greasy pans, wiping counters, smiling at rude customers, just so I could bring home a few dollars. At night, I would sit at the kitchen table, my hands aching, and help Daniel with his homework. "Mom, I don't want you to be tired anymore," he once said, his little hands clutching mine. I smiled at him then, even though my heart broke. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Someday, you'll grow up, and you'll make all of this worth it." I lived for those words. For years, I carried the hope that my sacrifices would mean Daniel could have the life I never did. And he did. He went to college, thanks to my savings. Every dollar I had managed to scrape together, I put toward his education. I denied myself everything: new clothes, vacations, even decent meals. I wore patched shoes until the soles gave out, while Daniel wore pressed shirts and had a roof over his head in his college dorm. And now he thought I was worth more dead than alive. When Daniel brought Claire home for the first time, I wanted to like her. She was beautiful, confident, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She shook my hand firmly, smiling just enough to hide the fact that she was already evaluating me, like a judge. "Your home is quaint," she had said that day, her tone polite but laced with subtle disdain. I told myself I was overthinking it. But over the years, little by little, I noticed her influence over Daniel. He began speaking to me differently, less warmly, more dismissive. Decisions about the house, about my life, were discussed between them first, and I was only informed afterward. They convinced me to move into the spare room for my safety. I gave up my own bedroom, my own furniture, even some of my heirlooms, because Claire insisted the house should look modern. At first, I thought it was just change, but soon I realized it was control. What Daniel and Claire didn't know was that I wasn't nearly as helpless as they believed. Yes, I let them think my only income was my pension. Yes, I let them assume that my savings had run dry. But that wasn't the truth. Years ago, while working at the diner, I started a small side business, baking pies and cakes for local events. At first, it was just neighbors and church folks, but word spread. Eventually, I was supplying pastries for weddings and community fairs. By the time I retired, I had quietly saved a considerable sum. Not millions, but enough to ensure I'd never truly be dependent. And then there was something else. Something even bigger. Something they didn't know I had. A secret investment tied to someone from my past. But I wasn't ready to reveal that yet. Not even to myself fully. Over the next few days, I pretended everything was normal. At breakfast, I poured Daniel his coffee and buttered my toast with steady hands, though my heart raced every time Claire glanced at me. One evening, I overheard them again in hushed tones. "She's getting weaker," Claire whispered. "It's only a matter of time." "You need to stop stalling," Daniel sighed. "I can't just rush this. She's my mother. Your mother is standing in the way of our future," Claire snapped. "Don't you care about the house? About the money?" I clenched my fists under the table, so it was true. They wanted everything. My home, my savings, my life. I realized I couldn't stay silent much longer. That week, I received a phone call that felt like fate. "Margaret?" "It's Evelyn," came the familiar voice. My childhood friend Evelyn, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. She was back in town. We met at a cafe downtown. As soon as I saw her, I felt tears sting my eyes. She was the same Evelyn, sharp, caring, and endlessly curious. "You look tired," she said gently, her hand on mine. "What's going on?" For a moment, I considered telling her everything, but fear held me back. Instead, I gave her a half-truth. "Things at home aren't easy." She frowned but didn't press. Instead, she handed me a folded envelope. "I've been meaning to give this back to you. Remember when you helped me years ago, when I had nothing? You told me to pay it forward. Well, I did. But I also kept track. And now, I want you to know what you really gave me." I opened the envelope later that night. Inside was a letter, and paperwork, legal documents. My breath caught. It was about the investment, the one I thought I had lost, the one Evelyn had secretly managed all these years, and the numbers on those papers. They weren't small, they were life-changing. As I stared at the documents, the voices of Daniel and Claire echoed in my mind. She's worth more dead than alive. I realized with a chill that I held the power to destroy their plans entirely. But then I noticed something else in the papers. A clause. A condition I had forgotten about. If I died under suspicious circumstances, the money wouldn't go to Daniel. It would go somewhere else entirely. My hands shook as I clutched the papers. A plan was forming. But so was a danger greater than I had ever imagined. The night I found Evelyn's papers, I barely slept. My heart thundered with a mixture of fear and power. I wasn't helpless. In fact, for the first time in years, I held a weapon. The truth. But how to use it? Daniel and Claire thought they controlled me, that I was just an old woman waiting to fade away. They didn't know about my secret investment. They didn't know the clause in those documents made my death useless to them. And most of all, they didn't know I had overheard their plan. I decided it was time to stop being silent. A week later, on a Sunday afternoon, I called for a family meeting. "Daniel, Claire," I said over breakfast, my voice calm even. "I think it's time we discuss some important matters. About the house. About my will." Claire's eyes gleamed instantly. "Finally," she said under her breath, but not quietly enough. Daniel shifted in his seat, uneasy. "Mom, maybe—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "This can't wait. I want everyone present. Tonight, by everyone." I meant not only Daniel and Claire, but Evelyn too. She had agreed to stand by me, though she didn't yet know all the details. I also called my lawyer, Mr. Whitman, a steady man who had known me since Daniel was a child. If there was going to be a reckoning, I wanted witnesses. That evening, the living room was heavy with tension. The curtains were drawn, the lamps glowed dimly, and the air felt thick enough to choke on. Daniel sat stiffly on the couch, his fingers drumming against his knee. Claire perched beside him, her chin high, eyes sharp with impatience. Evelyn sat quietly near the corner, her hands folded in her lap, watching carefully. Mr. Whitman spread some files on the coffee table. His presence alone made Claire twitch. "All right, Mother," Claire said, her smile tight. "What's this all about? You've had us waiting for weeks to discuss your arrangements." The way she said arrangements made bile rise in my throat. I steadied myself. This is about my future, and my past, and about the truth I've kept from both of you. I opened the envelope Evelyn had returned to me and laid the papers on the table. "These," I said, my voice steady, "are records of an investment I made decades ago. Money I earned, money I saved, money I built through hard work and sacrifice. You both assumed I had nothing left. You were wrong." Daniel leaned forward, his brow furrowing. Claire snatched up the papers, flipping through them with greedy eyes. This is a lot," she stammered. Her voice trembled before turning sharp again. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because it wasn't yours to know," I replied coldly. "This was my safety, my independence, something no one could take from me." Daniel's face paled. "Mom, I don't understand." "Why keep it a secret?" "Because I didn't want you to rely on it. I wanted you to build your own life, your own stability, not to circle like vultures, waiting for me to die." Claire's face hardened. "That's unfair. We've taken care of you. We've let you live in this house." "My house," I cut in sharply, my voice cracking like thunder. "This house was mine long before you came into the picture, Claire." The room grew tense. Claire's mask slipped, revealing the venom beneath. "You think you can play games with us," she hissed. "We've been patient. We've tolerated your old ways. But don't forget, everything here is tied to Daniel now. You can't change that." Evelyn gasped softly, but I raised a hand to calm her. "Really?" I said, my voice calm, almost mocking. "And what if I told you I know exactly what you think of me? That I've heard your whispers when you thought I wasn't there?" Daniel froze. Claire's eyes widened just for a moment, before narrowing again. "What whispers?" Daniel asked, his voice low. I leaned forward, my eyes locking with his. "She's worth more dead than alive." Those were your words, Daniel. Or should I say, your wife's words, with your silence as agreement. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Mr. Whitman's jaw tightened. Daniel stood abruptly, his face flushing. "Mom, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I snapped. "Because to me, it sounded like you were plotting my death for money." Claire's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We were talking about life insurance. Everyone does it. Stop twisting our words." But her tone betrayed her, and the room knew it. Mr. Whitman cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harper, perhaps it's time they understood the legal reality of the matter." I nodded. He pulled out another set of papers. "You see," Mr. Whitman said, his voice steady, "this investment your mother made years ago has a very specific clause. Should her death occur under suspicious circumstances, none of it passes to her son or his spouse. It would instead go to the secondary beneficiary she designated at the time." Claire blinked. "Secondary beneficiary?" "Yes," Mr. Whitman said. "Someone entirely outside of this household. Meaning, if your mother were to die suddenly, you would inherit nothing." Daniel's face crumpled, a storm of shock and betrayal. "Mom, Who? I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. That's not something I'm ready to reveal yet. But know this, I protected myself. Long before either of you thought about protecting me, Claire shot to her feet, her voice rising. This is absurd. You're lying. You've always been manipulative, keeping secrets, holding things over Daniel's head, and now you're making us the villains. You made yourselves the villains, I said quietly, but with an edge sharper than steel. Daniel's voice cracked. Mum, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean what I said. It was just words, I demanded, my eyes burning. Words have meaning, Daniel. And those words told me exactly what I mean to you. Not love, not gratitude, just a number. A calculation of what I'm worth. The silence after my words was suffocating. Evelyn wiped a tear from her cheek. Even Mr. Whitman looked moved. Just when the air couldn't get heavier, Claire leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with something dark. You think you're clever, she sneered. You think you've beaten us by hiding money and waving papers around, but you don't know everything either, do you? My stomach tightened. What are you talking about? Claire's smile was cold, cruel. Ask your precious son where he's been spending his nights. Ask him what debts he's racked up. Or better yet, ask him what he already signed away without your knowledge. Daniel's face went white. Claire, stop. But it was too late. The secret was out. And I realized, with horror, that Daniel had done something reckless, something that could destroy not only him, but me as well. The night after Claire's cruel revelation about Daniel's debts, I couldn't breathe. Her words clung to me like smoke, stinging my chest. Daniel had already signed something. Something that could destroy everything I had carefully guarded. I knew the time for quiet. Private battles had ended. Secrets thrive in shadows, but the truth burns brighter in public. And so, I made a decision. This would not be settled behind closed doors. It would be laid bare, before witnesses, before the law, before anyone Daniel and Claire had tried to deceive. I was done being their victim. The following week, I arranged a formal meeting at the community center. A neutral ground, a place where Daniel and Claire couldn't twist the narrative. I invited Evelyn, of course, and Mr. Whitman, my lawyer. But I also extended invitations to close family friends, neighbors, and even members of our church group. These were people who had seen me babysit their children, cook meals for gatherings, volunteer when others turned away. People who respected me, people who would listen. Daniel thought it was a family update. Claire, ever ambitious, dressed in her finest dress, convinced this would finally be the day I announced my will in their favor. She even whispered to Daniel as they entered, "Smile." This is the moment everything pays off, but she didn't know what was waiting for her. The hall was filled with murmurs as chairs scraped and people settled in. I stood at the front, my heart racing, palms slick, but my voice steady as I began. "Thank you all for coming," I said, scanning the faces before me. "I've called you here because I need to speak the truth, a truth I've hidden for too long. It concerns my family, my future, and the betrayal I've endured in silence." Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Claire crossed her arms, trying to look unimpressed. "This is unnecessary, Mother," Daniel muttered under his breath. But I ignored him. "I overheard something weeks ago," I continued, my throat tightening. "Something that shattered me. My son, and his wife, spoke about me as though I were nothing more than a number, a burden, a body worth more dead than alive." A sharp intake of breath filled the hall. An elderly woman near the front shook her head in disbelief. Whispers spread like wildfire. Daniel's face drained of color. Claire smirked, though her eyes flickered nervously. "Mom," Daniel began. But Evelyn stood up suddenly. Her voice rang out, trembling but strong. "I was there too. I heard it. I begged her to tell you all sooner, but she was too hurt." Mr. Whitman stepped forward then, placing a folder on the table. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this isn't just about words. It's about actions, and the actions we discovered are far more damning." He opened the folder, pulling out signed contracts. Daniel Harper has accumulated debts, large debts, over the past 2 years, and in his desperation, he signed over certain future rights, specifically a claim on his mother's estate should she pass. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Some gasped, others shook their heads in disgust. Daniel's voice cracked. "That's not true. I didn't—" "Your signature is here, Daniel," Mr. Whitman said firmly, holding up the document. "These are legal papers. You effectively gambled on your own mother's death." The silence that followed was deafening. Claire leapt up, her voice shrill. "Don't twist this. We were trying to secure our future. She's old, everyone knows." But she was cut off by a chorus of gasps and angry voices. One man shouted, "How dare you?" Another woman muttered loudly, "Disgusting." Claire's mask slipped. Her face reddened, her words spilling like venom. "You all act so high and mighty, but you don't know what it's like living with her. She controls everything, keeps secrets, hoards money while we struggle. She doesn't deserve—" "Enough!" I roared, my voice echoing across the hall. The room went dead silent. "I kept my savings secret not to hurt you, but to protect myself. Because I knew greed when I saw it. And I was right. Tears stung my eyes as I looked at Daniel. I raised you, Daniel. I sacrificed everything for you, and you, my own son, saw me as a payday." Daniel's lips trembled. For the first time, guilt flickered across his face, but Claire grabbed his arm, hissing, "Don't you dare apologize. We're not finished." Among those gathered was Judge Harper, a retired family court judge and longtime family friend. She rose slowly, her expression grave. "I have heard enough," she said, her voice commanding. "What you two have done, conspiring to profit from your mother's death, signing away rights to money that isn't yours, borders on criminal exploitation." Gasps echoed again. Claire's bravado faltered. Daniel's shoulders slumped. The judge continued, "If Mrs. Harper wishes, I can help initiate proceedings. At the very least, this community now knows the truth of your intentions." Claire sank into her chair, her face pale. Daniel covered his face with his hands, shame written in every line. I stepped forward then, my heart hammering, but my voice steady. "From this moment on, I revoke any inheritance you expected. I am transferring my estate to a trust, one that benefits causes I believe in and people who truly care for me. Daniel, Claire, you will receive nothing." A collective gasp filled the room. Some clapped softly, others whispered in astonishment. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, of relief, of pride. Claire bolted up, screaming, "You can't do this, we're family." I stared at her coldly. Family isn't blood. Family is love, respect, and loyalty, and you've shown me none of those. The hall erupted into murmurs of agreement. Neighbors shook their heads at Daniel and Claire, their disgust plain. As the crowd dispersed, many approached me with hugs, kind words, or simply silent nods of solidarity. For the first time in years, I felt safe. But when I looked back at Daniel, my heart still twisted. He sat, slumped, defeated, his wife's fury turned inward now, berating him for ruining their chance. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to cut him off completely. But he was still my son, and that truth weighed heavier than any contract or betrayal. That night, as I lay in bed, the echoes of gasps and whispers still rang in my ears. Justice had been served. The greedy had been humiliated. My independence was secured. But one question lingered, clawing at my heart in the silence. Could a mother ever truly stop loving her child, even when he wished her dead? It's strange how life can both break and mend you at the same time. Months have passed since that day in the community hall, when I exposed Daniel and Claire's betrayal. The memory still lingers, as sharp as glass under bare feet. Their words, their shame, the crowd's gasps echoing in my ears. But the wound has begun to scar, no longer bleeding the way it once did. I moved out of that house soon after, not in shame, but in strength. I rented a small cottage near the edge of town, surrounded by lilac bushes and a garden that reminded me of my youth. For the first time in years, I lived not as a dependent mother, but as a woman who chose her own peace. At first, the silence was unbearable. No Daniel clattering around, no Claire slamming doors in irritation, just me and the hum of the refrigerator. But slowly, that silence became a companion. I learned to hear my own thoughts again, thoughts that weren't clouded by fear or betrayal. Daniel didn't come to see me after the confrontation, not once. Claire, from what I hear, filed for divorce a few months later. Debt piled higher than their love could withstand. Word reached me through neighbors that Daniel had moved into a small apartment, working odd jobs, drinking more than he should. When I pictured him alone, my heart ached despite everything. He was still my son, the boy who once brought me daisies from the garden, the boy I once held against my chest when fevers nearly took him. But I couldn't rescue him anymore. Love doesn't mean enabling destruction. Sometimes the kindest thing a mother can do is step back and let her child face the consequences of his own choices. That realization broke me all over again, but it also freed me. Evelyn became my anchor. She visited often, bringing me pies she baked, helping me plant herbs in the garden, laughing with me over tea. Sometimes she'd squeeze my hand and say, "You don't know how strong you are." But I did know, because strength isn't measured by how much you can carry. It's measured by how much you can let go. The community, too, surrounded me in ways I never expected. Women from church stopped by with groceries. A neighbor offered to mow my lawn. Even the children on my street would wave and call me Grandma Harper, though I wasn't related to them. Slowly, I realized, family is not always blood. Sometimes family is chosen. One evening, while watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of orange and pink, I pulled out my old journal. I wrote about the incident, about Daniel's words that sliced me open. "She's worth more dead than alive." I wrote about how those words nearly destroyed me, but also about how they pushed me to finally stand up for myself. If he hadn't said them, maybe I would have continued living quietly in their shadows, slowly fading away. In a twisted way, his cruelty became my awakening. Nearly a year later, on a cold winter evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Daniel standing there. His face was thinner, older somehow, lines of regret etched deeply into his skin. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking, I don't deserve to be here." My chest tightened. For a moment, I couldn't speak. All the hurt, all the betrayal surged back like a tide, but then I saw his eyes, not cold, not greedy, but hollow, desperate, drowning. "Why are you here, Daniel?" I asked softly. Tears filled his eyes. "Because I've lost everything. Claire's gone. The debts nearly swallowed me whole. And every night I hear your voice, the way you said family is love, respect, and loyalty. And I realized I never gave you that. I just want to say I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, heavy and trembling. Did I forgive him? Not fully. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a road you walk, one step at a time. But in that moment, I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, and I let him step inside from the cold. As I sit here now writing this, I know not every story ends in perfect healing. Some scars never fade, some bonds remain broken. But life isn't about tying every loose end neatly. It's about learning which ends to leave behind and which to mend with care. To anyone listening, betrayal may shatter you, but it can also show you who you are. It can strip away illusions and reveal the strength you never knew you carried. And remember this, you are never truly helpless, not as long as you have your dignity, your voice, and the courage to stand in the truth. When my granddaughter asked me recently, "Grandma, do you ever feel lonely?" I smiled. Sometimes, I admitted, but loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of love. And I'm surrounded by love now. Maybe not in the way I expected, but in the way I needed. I looked out at my blooming garden, at Evelyn laughing in the kitchen, at the neighborhood children chasing fireflies in the yard, and I realized I was never truly abandoned. I was simply being led to a new chapter. Betrayal may come from those closest to us, but strength comes from within. Family is not defined by blood, but by love, loyalty, and respect. Never let anyone convince you that your worth depends on them, because your value is beyond measure. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Do you believe forgiveness is possible after such betrayal? Or is it better to walk away forever? I'd love to hear your thoughts.